To Sun Tzu, the strategist mastering Shi is akin to water flowing downhill, automatically finding the swiftest and easiest course. A successful commander waits before charging headlong into battle. He shies away from an enemy's strength. He spends his time observing and cultivating changes in the strategic landscape. He studies the enemy's preparations and his morale, husbands resources and defines them carefully, and plays on his opponent's psychological weaknesses, until at last he perceives the opportune moment to strike the enemy at his weakest point. He then deploys his resources swiftly and suddenly, rushing downhill along the path of least resistance, in an assertion of superiority that careful timing and preparation have rendered a fait accompli. The art of war articulates a doctrine less of territorial conquest than of psychological dominance. It was the way the North Vietnamese fought America, though Hanoi usually translated its psychological gains into actual territorial conquests as well. In general, Chinese statesmanship exhibits a tendency to view the entire strategic landscape as part of a single whole, good and evil, near and far, strength and weakness, past and future, all interrelated. In contrast to the Western approach of treating history as a process of modernity achieving a series of absolute victories over evil and backwardness, the traditional Chinese view of history emphasized a cyclical process of decay and rectification, in which nature and the world can be understood but not completely mastered. The best that can be accomplished is to grow into harmony with it. Strategy and statecraft become means of combative coexistence with opponents. The goal is to maneuver them into weakness while building up one's own shi, or strategic position. This, this maneuvering approach is, of course, the ideal and not always the reality. Throughout their history, the Chinese have had their share of unsubtle and brutal conflicts, both at home and occasionally abroad. Once these conflicts erupted, such as during the unification of China under the Qin dynasty, the clashes of the Three Kingdoms period, the quelling of the Taiping Rebellion, and the 20th century Civil War, China was subjected to wholesale loss of life on a level comparable to the European World Wars. The bloodiest conflicts occurred as a result of the breakdown of the internal Chinese system, in other words, as an aspect of internal adjustments of a state, for which domestic stability and protection against looming foreign invasion are equal concerns. For China's classical sages, the world could never be conquered. Wise rulers could hope only to harmonize with its trends. There was no new world to populate, no redemption awaiting mankind on distant shores. The promised land was China, and the Chinese were already there. The blessings of the Middle Kingdom's culture might theoretically be extended by China's superior example to the foreigners on the empire's periphery. But there was no glory to be found in venturing across the seas to convert heathens to Chinese ways. The customs of the Celestial dynasty were plainly beyond the attainment of the far barbarians. This may be the deeper meaning of China's abandonment of its naval tradition. Lecturing in the 1820s on his philosophy of history, the German philosopher Hegel described the Chinese tendency to see the huge Pacific Ocean to their east as a barren waste. He noted that China, by and large, did not venture to the seas and instead depended on its great landmass. The land imposed an infinite multitude of dependencies, whereas the sea propelled people beyond these limited circles of thought and action. This stretching out of the sea beyond the limitations of the land is wanting to the splendid political edifices of Asiatic states, although they themselves border on the sea, as for example China. For them, the sea is only the limit, the ceasing of the land. They have no positive relations to it. The West had set sail to spread its trade and values throughout the world. In this respect, Hegel argued, land-bound China, which in fact had once been the world's greatest naval power, was severed from the general historical development. With these distinctive traditions and millennial habits of superiority, China entered the modern age a singular kind of empire, a state claiming universal relevance for its culture and institutions, but making few efforts to proselytize, the wealthiest country in the world, but one that was indifferent to foreign trade and technological innovation, a culture of cosmopolitanism overseen by a political elite oblivious to the onset of the Western age of exploration, and a political unit of unparalleled geographic extent that was unaware of the technological and historical currents that would soon threaten its existence.